Tonight. What is ever? Not with these words. Ever, sister tonight. Like ever coming for you. That have those that for you, as it was coming for you, dear sister tonight. It's for you, as it was coming. Be sister tonight. With the them those that have.
Welcome, everybody, to the second annual SoCal, well, today is SoCal, but Synth Society Summit. Super happy to be here, and I'm about to bring in the soldering team and the first panel, but first I want to thank j.mccoy, aka Sound Units, for a fabulous performance, and what a way to open up the Saturday panel sessions. All right, so let's bring in the rest of the crew. Let me unmute all of you. All right.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Good.
All right.
Let me do a quick introduction before you guys all get wrapped up in combos. All right, so we have Robin Vincent here, aka Molten Modular. I'm sure some of you know his YouTube channel. If you don't, you definitely need to check it out, and the link is in the description. We have Saddle Up the Robots here representing New York Modular Society. We have Joe and Dan repping North Coast Modular Collective, and they performed last night. And if you did not see that, definitely go check out last night's performances. And up in this middle corner here, we have the SoCal Synth Society crew. Let me unmute you guys. Sorry. All right, Alex, that's oscidigi. Raise your hand, Alex, so everyone can see you. That's Abe Mora, aka Earth 626. We've got Trevor from the infamous Perfect Circuit. Yeah, I called you out, Trevor. And that's Justin, and he is the Synth DIY guru here too from the SoCal Synth Society. All right, so I'll let you guys chat. Please, if anyone has questions in the chat for the panel, soldering, whatever, what have you, please drop them in, and I'm going to read them off and make sure they are able to get your questions answered. And yeah, like talk, you guys. Like, how about Joe? You guys start off. What's happening? What's happening? What are you guys doing?
Yeah. So we're in North Coast Modular Collective, and we're about music instruments and community. And so during pandemic time, we've been focusing mostly on like the instruments and music thing right now, because it's kind of our community thing is a little bit more in person, and that's been a little hard lately.
Yeah.
But we're excited to get back in it. And man, I think some of the starter questions you had were awesome. Like, you know, is this worth it? The DIY thing, you know, how do you get stuff, all that, you know? And I was wondering if maybe like Robin, you want to give us a really quick like what you're about, in case anybody here is new and don't know, because you're one of our special guests. And then I was wondering, since you've been doing this for a while and you also do videos, and we were wondering, like, how is that process of self-documenting yourself influenced like how you get going, and like do you ever go back and learn from those? Do you find that like your notes, that kind of thing? So there's a whole lot. Just
a simple question.
Yeah. No, I haven't learned a thing. I don't think over the time. Each time it seems like a fresh blunder into something. I mean, I feel I'm soaking up stuff as I go, because one of the things which, I mean, I actually assumed when I started soldering kits that I would start to understand. I would, the world of electronics would be revealed to me, and I'd understand how a filter worked or how a VCO worked or this, that, and the other. And it's not the case. I'm essentially doing a jigsaw, but with cool tools and smoke and stuff. And Yeah, and that in itself is fascinating and interesting, but I haven't learned anywhere near as much as I thought that I would. And that's not to take away from how much fun this is and what I get out of it. It's just that you can't assume that you will suddenly understand circuits just because you're doing a kit and following a guide and soldering stuff. But also to understand that that's okay. You don't have to become an engineer to do this. You can do it because it's fun and because you get such an awesome result from your labors at the end. So, I mean, I've learned a few things like, not to chew on the solder and to which end's hot and keeping things tidy a bit more. I'm not finding so many components on the floor anymore. All of these things that I've improved my game, as it were, which is good. That all just comes with time. But I still think I project this idea that any old idiot could do this because any old idiot is doing this. If that if that makes sense.
Hey, Quincas.
Hey,
It's so
what's
good
up?
to see you.
Good to
We're
see you
doing
too.
well.
Sorry,
Hey.
I was using an old link. I think the first link, and
Yeah.
I was just waiting there for somebody to let me into the show.
It was
Thank
a
you for-
lonely show of one.
Thank you for the email with the update. I'm a little out of, but yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I think you're hearing me mono. Are you guys hearing me mono? I'm
No, it's
hearing
good.
myself in mono.
No, you sound good. You sound
Sounds
good.
good.
hmm
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And for those who don't know, he is the DIY guy.
The legend.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kinkus, so you've been doing the synth DIY guy thing on YouTube for a while, and
Yeah.
you've got all kinds of great stuff up there for like if you're getting started and low budget kinds of things.
Yeah.
I'll ask you the same question I asked Robin. Like, how has that been for you going through that process of doing those recordings and posting them? Like, do you feel like that's kind of like your notes that you sometimes go back to, or is that more or less like a conversation
Totally.
you're having with people, that kind of thing?
Totally. It's become. It started out. I'm a musician, and I wanted to have modular synthesizers, and it wasn't very easy access here in Mexico or in Brazil, where I'm originally from. And as a kid, I had a phase of soldering little circuits, since I was kind of a nerd, and I was into computer programming and soldering little circuits and stuff. So at this point in my life, I was already 36. I was moving to Mexico, and I found out about the synth DIY movement, or the existence of synth DIY, from my friend Arthur Joly in Brazil, who's well known there for his gigantic modulars that he has built over the last 15 years or so. And he gave me a bunch of U-Synth boards, and I got to Mexico with those boards. I looked at them and I said, I'm never gonna do this, right? But then eventually I made like I got a monotron, and it had a filter, an analog filter. I started using that in my studio productions. And then that led me to building a little Tarpon console, which led me to building a little Twin T oscillator, which gave me a little bit of confidence to look at those U-Synth boards and think, maybe I can do this. And then I went into the Ray Wilson website to look for a power supply and saw that he had a one-board synth, the Mini Synth Mark II, the Sound Lab. And I said, hey, if I'm going to build a power supply, I might as well build a whole synth, And that was a little bit of a leap. I learned a lot. I went downtown Mexico City and bought a lot of wrong components before I got the right ones. And eventually, after 2 or 3 months, I had this thing, and I made a whole album with it that I dedicated to Ray Wilson. And that got me hooked completely. And after that, I started building those U-Synth boards and had my first modular cabinet and all that. So at first, I was documenting very informally. But at some point, I started seeing the kit scene, and I really wanted some kits, and I couldn't really afford them. So I took a leap. I thought, I can do photography. I'm a photography enthusiast. I have like good cameras and lenses from that. I've worked as a voiceover artist. I am a sound engineer. I'm a musician, and I build synthesizers. So why not put all of those skills together and offer that to the synth DIY market industry So I bought a first kit, which was the main key lines. It's like a matrix mixer with springs that you play by touching it. I bought that from Modular Addict and made my first video, my first kit review. And that I used as the pilot to pitch to Synthcube Thong, and eventually Bifaco and Erica Synth. And slowly I started getting these free kits. I was just doing it for free kits at first, you know? But eventually this became, like you said, like documentation of my process. To where I was learning from myself at some point. Like the other day, in fact, I was using my Erica Synth drum sequencer and I forgot about how to do something. And I was hired by Erica Synth to make the video manual for this thing, which is a little embarrassing that I didn't know how to do something on it. But then I had to go to my own video, you know, and click on the tab and see and learn from myself. So yeah, plus it makes me have to learn the modules really well, inside and out. So each new kit module that I receive, not only do I build it, which already gives me a sort of a deeper knowledge of the module than when you just buy something. Especially if it doesn't work and you have to troubleshoot it, then you really learn how it works. Otherwise, it's just paint by numbers, right? But then I also have to really go in and find out and come up with creative ways to demonstrate what the module can do, so that my demos and build videos aren't like the same as everybody else's. So that gives me a creative challenge, a musical challenge, and the technical challenge of really learning the ins and outs of the module. So as I build my system up, I'm also building up my knowledge base, so to speak. So as a musician and as a composer, I use these instruments in my day job. You know, I use them to compose music for film and documentaries and media and whatnot. So I feel like because I go through this process of this video documentation, which serves many purposes, right? It serves to help others, it serves for me to get free gear, and it serves for me to really learn each module. So it's for me, the synth DIY route has enriched my experience as a musician and as a composer and as a sound engineer, sound designer, and producer overall. So I feel like it really focused me in a direction. I used to be a multi-instrumentalist that did any style from cumbias to heavy metal, and that's great for advertising, which is what I mostly did when I was in Brazil. But when you want to be taken more seriously as an artist, as a composer, it's nice to have a direction. You know, even if you can do everything, people need to know you as an expert in something. So I'm here in Mexico as a composer. I'm known as the modular guy.
Cool.
So
yeah. I love that phrase you just said about paint by numbers. that's something. So the paint that we're using, I've seen in the chat a few people have been asking like leaded or non-leaded. And so let's just hit out the room, you know, quickly go around. Like, are you using leaded or unleaded? We're using unleaded here.
Okay, I'm using leaded. I know I'm in Mexico. Things here are old school, third world. I get my solder in the local store. You know, they only have the 60/40 leaded stuff. That's what I use, and I like how malleable it is and how I can work with it. I've tried a little bit on leaded and didn't really get on with it so much.
Yeah, leaded over here.
Huge pain. I'm going to read the question so the SoCal crew can read that too. So who scrubs off the rosin residue from their boards?
Not me. I don't clean anything.
What'd you say, Justin?
Water soluble and rinse it off.
Water soluble. And then it's really, your microphone is really soft. So
yeah.
I use water soluble Kester solder and just rinse it off with water.
Rinse it off with water then if you're using water soluble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is the thing. If you're getting into soldering and you do use unleaded, then you have to use a lot more flux
right.
to get it going. And a little bit of higher temperature on your iron. And the trade-off, I think, is that you get more particulate, like smoke, from the flux. So you have to make sure you have some ventilation there.
Over here, I find that when the smoke from the flux hovers on the board, that's when you get those stains. So I've developed kind of a breathing rhythm where so that I don't breathe in the flux and I'm always blowing on the board. So
Right, yeah.
no smoke hovers, and usually at the end I look at my boards and they're clean enough, you know. But then again I'm using leaded, which doesn't require any flux. It has flux already in it. So.
I thought I was the only person who did that. It's like almost like a meditation thing for me.
Yeah, it's a breathing rhythm, right? And it helps you not breathe it in, and it keeps it from lingering there. Because yeah, with that little smoke ring cloud that stays there, whenever that forms, you know you're gonna get a rosin like a smudge right there. And then when I get like nasty ones, I will maybe clean those, you know, just like quickly with a toothbrush and a little IPA.
So we got a few people here who have been doing this for a while. I wanted to ask, in terms of like getting started, not how you got started, but like if you were starting today, knowing what you know now, what would you do? I don't know. Saddle up the robots. What do you got?
Probably wouldn't have started.
Who starts?
I don't know. Yeah, hard to say. I would start, I guess, by pretty much what I did was picking the easiest thing possible so that I knew if I screwed it up, it wasn't a big deal, which is exactly what I did. I screwed up a few of my first modules to the point of no repair. So that was just, cost. But it was part of the learning process, and it was fun. And, now I'm just trying not to burn my house down. That's pretty much it. That's the rule. Don't burn the house down.
Right. You talked about the mess ups. That's something that I love to talk about because I know getting into DIY, one of the things I was afraid of was because I wasn't an engineer. I didn't know, not electronic engineer or anything. And I was like, well, what happens when it goes wrong? I did the paint by numbers, but now, I don't have a picture. I've got, it just sits there.
I mean,
so how do I
adult Legos, right? Like that's what it is. Yeah. It's like Legos for someone who's maybe wants nerds. Like a higher risk Lego.
Yeah.
A little bit more intense. But
so what are some things that you do to like figure out what to fix?
I've gotten better about not having to fix things by just being more organized, right? Like first few things I ordered were like kits and crap like that. And like I said, I screwed those up pretty badly. But once I just started to get better about this stuff and just keep all my parts organized and, actually like look up how to properly solder and not just be like, yeah, it fucking works. Like that was me for a while, So actually like teaching myself how to do this properly and then getting a few successful kits under my belt, I ended up building a really big sequencer. And after that, it's kind of just been, all systems go from there. I don't typically buy kits as much anymore. I just buy boards and I just put the pieces together myself. And like I said, it's just all a game of organization, in my opinion. And organization and not burning your house down.
That's important to keep in mind.
Crucial.
Yeah. Quincas, what's the most common kind of mistake you find if you ever get any when you're doing your DIYs?
Yeah, usually my mistakes come from overconfidence. Like the fact that I've built over 50 kits makes me think I know everything that can be thrown at me. So often I won't really take a good concentrated look at the build guides. I'll just look at the board and be like, well, that's, put on the resistors. And I'm the guy that people are always asking, why do you solder from the top? The resistors and diodes, I just put them all in. And for one, that's good because if you make any mistakes, you haven't soldered them yet. And you usually notice by the time you finish, you notice that some are missing or some values are too many. And you'll be like, oh, something I did wrong. So you backtrack. And before you soldered, you fix that. And then solder from above, you don't have to open all the little legs on the bottom and deal with that forest of leads with the tip of your iron. So plated through holes, I solder them from above. But sometimes some kits have some particularities, like you have to put that little nut thing before you put that other little thing. If you don't, then you have to unsolder a socket. So my main mistake is usually not having the beginner's mind to take each project as if it were my first, and really study up and pay close attention to the build guide before continuing. Usually my mistakes come from something like that I didn't pay attention to, and it was a particular tricky part of the build. One thing that I learned, for example, I know it's this contentious maybe because parasitic capacitance or whatever, but sockets in ICs always, because I've made so many stupid mistakes where I've just inverted an IC, and it was so easy to just pop it off. If it broke, I put another one in. If it didn't, I just swap it. And whenever I thought, oh, the kit didn't come with sockets, but I'm good enough, I'm experienced enough, I don't need them, I won't use any sockets. And you almost always, that's when I don't, I screw one up and I burn the board. I've had, in a couple of occasions, had to meekly ask my partners to supply me with a second board because I've ruined the traces of the first one, trying to pull out an IC. So yeah, use sockets.
Put the sockets. What I'm using right now actually didn't come with sockets, so I had to put them in myself.
Yeah, but if you do that, then pay like triple, quadruple attention to the orientation.
Yep.
Good advice.
Be super sure. The other day, I was building a project, and I actually soldered the teensy on the wrong side of the board. So, so then the whole teensy, to the headers and the headers to the board, and I was like, and this time I had thought about it. I was like, I'm going to use a socket on this teensy because I've been screwed before. But in this project in particular, if you use the socket, the teensy USB output wouldn't line up with the hole on the chassis. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll have to do it like that. And then I did it on the wrong side and tried to pull out pin by pin, and eventually had to ask the maker to send me another board, discounted from my fee on the build video, whatnot.
Speaking of that, then I just kind of want to interject. I'm going to pop up any questions from the chat, so be sure just kind of look down. And I want to interrupt as well and read them, just because I know SoCal is kind of sitting further away from their screen. So any tips on unsoldering? I know that Justin could definitely tell some information about this because I messed up my Syncussion a while back, and I had to do a great bit of unsoldering. But wait, where did he go?
I have a suggestion while you find Justin.
Yeah. Oh, there he is.
The thing about soldering is, like, we all talk about, like, is it the musician or is it the talent or is it the gear? And I think we're all a little biased to modular, but I will say definitively, good gear helps with soldering. Like a nice soldering iron, and this thing has saved my life so many times. It's the Engineer SSL Super I don't know. It's like a metal.
Yes.
What is that?
Yeah.
Like it's like the stuff of legends.
It's a solder sucker.
Yeah, but it's like the best possible one. It's made
Rolls
of
Royce of solder suckers.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I usually prefer desoldering braid if I can get away with using desoldering braid.
I can't cope with that.
I'm more careful with it. It doesn't.
I know you have in your hand too, Justin.
I am never successful with desoldering braid.
Yeah. I got Ray Wilson told me to use that instead of suckers, because the suckers on some of the older boards would suck the pad right off the board.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Oh wow.
What was the other thing that you had to help me with, Justin, when I really screwed up that board? You had to heat it up. Didn't you have like a heating gun or something? Pull the mic closer to you. Sorry. Yeah, just so
I still haven't bought a heating gun. I need one.
Wait, Justin, we can't hear you. Pull the mic to you so you can, while you're talking. Yeah. Thank you.
If you
there
ever
you go.
remove an IC or something with multiple pins, hot air really helps, so you can heat them all up at once and just pull it out. Or just cut the legs off and remove them one at a time, because if you try and do it all at once with a sucker or something, it's just, you're going to ruin the board. So just cut the legs off and
Yeah.
Yep. Oh boy, this thing has some tough screws.
Mhm.
Quincas,
Justin, SoCal, what are you guys working on out there?
A Steiner microcon voice. It's going to be a 5U Moog unit module.
Cool.
Nice.
The microcon is a classic.
California.
right now
I'm actually not working on anything DIY, synth DIY related. I bought this iLoud speaker, and it came with a battery busted. Doesn't charge. So Sweetwater is kind enough to send me a replacement free of charge, and they let me keep this one. So obviously, being the DIY guy, and this is another point, after one becomes a synth builder and gets into synth DIY, one looks at these things differently. You know, so instead of accepting this will always be plugged in, or discarding it or giving it away, I'm gonna open it up and see if the battery cable is unplugged for some reason, or if it, or what kind of battery it is. Maybe I can buy a Roomba battery and replace it. So it gives you sort of independence. You can create your own solutions to problems when before you were totally dependent on the industry or in service. Now you can service things yourself and calibrate things yourself and things like that. So that's one thing that I think was really positive in my getting into DIY.
Hey, SoCal crew, you want to pass the mic around and shout out what you're working on?
Sure. Yeah, well, Quincas, I was going to say I'm holding right now a 3-tom MS-22 kit.
Ah, cool.
So
those are awesome.
Definitely have a video to reference on that front.
Yeah. Tom hired me to do a build video and a demo video for that one. It was a fun module to build and review. It's the biggest PCB sandwich I've ever seen. But he made it. He designed it so that they're so close together that it's actually still fits in skiffs. It's like how many boards is it? Like 6? How many layers?
It comes all together. You snap it off, right? So
yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep.
Yeah. It's a 6-layer
4 HP, right?
PCB sandwich. Yeah, and it's 4 HP.
Yeah,
so that's why, you know.
So cool.
It's a really good filter. It's one of my favorites. Like in my travel performance case right now, it's the filter that I'm using.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But right now, just finishing off the Music Thing modular mini drive.
Ah, that's another one I just built as well, which is great. In fact, the demo I made for that, I thought it was so funky. It sounds like a clavinet or something. I used the Erica Synth's black sequencer with high shuffle and some like filtering before the drive. I liked it so much that I'm using that riff for a full song. I'm writing like
That's great.
A funky hip hoppy song using that the audio from my demo.
That's great.
Sample myself. That's a way to not have copyright issues, you know.
Right. What else we got over there, crew?
I got Euclidean circles.
Nice.
I just been busy at home building a Eurorack case for my room.
Awesome. So, hey, let's talk starter kits. Like, you know, one of the questions we always get, and I haven't quite seen it in the chat yet, but is like, how do I get started? Like, what do I need to get in order to get started? Obviously, a soldering iron, but like, what's the bare needs to get started? What do you think?
Get extra blocks.
You need solder.
Yeah.
Solder, yeah.
There's a good article on AI Synthesis website that Abe did. It lists his basic recommended things. I mean, of course, I've got my safety glasses and I'm not wearing them. But there's, you know, your solder, your mat, your soldering iron,
multimeter,
cleaner, cutter.
You don't need a multimeter. No, keep it small. No, honestly, if you buy a soldering iron in a kit from Amazon for a $5, it will come with a little bit of solder and a sponge, and that's honestly all you need. Multimeter is next level, I would suggest.
Well, but it's a close next level because you need it to check continuity, for example. Before you plug a module in, it's a good idea to make sure it's not inverted.
That's what the smoke test is for.
Okay.
Touche.
You know, it's
Good
next,
point.
next level.
You can tell
Okay.
there are a couple of camps of build styles here.
Molten modular was literal.
I actually had a multimeter before I had a soldering iron.
Yeah.
It's
Just
good
had
advice.
it.
It is honestly good advice. I mean, I'm just always, because I'm constantly being given good advice on my channel from lovely people, and much of it is having to spend hundreds and hundreds on all sorts of bits of gear. I'm supposed to have, I've got an extraction thing over here, and
Yeah.
I've got to have a military grade soldering iron, and all of those things it's good advice. But
If you can
I think
have
you
it.
have to pick these things up over time, and if you're starting out on your first kit, to stick $200-$300 down on a load of gear before you've bought your first $50 kit seems a little bit, out of whack. I think you need to start simple and feel the frustration that a cheap soldering iron brings before you then
It took me about a
get
year
something
before
a bit
I got
nicer.
one.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
I'm still using a cheap hobby Weller iron. I haven't sprung for like a Hako or anything like that. But at least it's got temperature control.
Yeah, but there are levels to these things, absolutely, and people can find their own level, I think. And people who want to do it with really good gear to start with, that's absolutely fine. Go, cool, do that, but don't feel that that's a certainty that that's what you have to do. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, there are a ton of cheap.
Does really help though.
Inexpensive soldering irons, like on Amazon, and they're all over the place. I mean, my first soldering iron, I got it at Radio Shack when that was still around. So, I think I bought it for like $20, and that I used that for a couple of years before I actually spent money on a good soldering iron.
Yeah. I mean, mentioning about the lead-free solder a little bit earlier, I started off with lead-free solder and a cheap soldering iron, and it was hard work. It absolutely was hard work. And moving to a better iron and leaded solder was a complete revelation and made everything far, far easier. And so, yeah, I would love people to jump onto that immediately, but sometimes the journey's worth it. Sometimes it's worth a bit of hard work just to find out whether this is something you're going to like.
But that's kind of the key, though, is that knowing that if you get the cheap thing, that you're going to have a hard time, because that's almost a balancing act. Because I've seen some people just like completely bail on the whole enterprise because like they had a bad experience, So
no, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Gung ho, start guerrilla building, guerrilla style building. That's how I started here, man. My first thing that I built was I called it the little drone, and I put together on one single piece of perf board a bunch of different little circuits that I found online. One was a white noise generator, one was a sine wave twin T oscillator, one was an entire punk console, one was a mixer to mix all those together, and then I wanted a filter at the end. And I found Ray Wilson's weird sound generator filter, and I built it from the schematics, following those connections. So I created my own little monster on one single board, and obviously power supply requirements and crosstalk and things were crazy. And the filter didn't work, so I started bugging Ray Wilson on email about why his filter design wasn't working on my little drone box, and that's how we became friends. He helped me debug over email, which was something he hated to do, but basically I needed to increase the impedance going into the LM 13700, so I swapped the resistor there, and the filter magically worked, and I offered to mix one of his songs, and then the rest was history.
So I'm going to ask a question about, if I'm starting, I've got my kit now to do or I've got my tools now to do the stuff. Right. Maybe I bought the $5 iron. Maybe I got the slightly step up, that kind of thing. But what's a good first kit? I was wondering, Dan, do you have any thoughts on a good starter kit?
The mini drive is awesome. It's super simple. So it's almost foolproof. It's just 3-4 points of solder. So that's a good one. It's cheap too. So it sounds great. So that's a good one to start with. You can even use it with outboard gear that's not modular. So I think the mini drive is a good choice. I have a whole playlist in my channel actually about easy beginner kits.
Unbuffered malt from AI Synthesis.
Yeah.
The easiest thing possible.
Yeah, just for jacks together.
A malt, yeah.
I was gonna say a malt too.
I'll give another vote for any really any of the simple AI synthesis kits. I think Abe did a really good job documenting and making stuff really beginner friendly. I started with a mixer. It didn't work, but that was his mixer is what I started with, and gave me enough enthusiasm to keep going.
Microphony is another good one.
3-knob, his simple CV mixer with 3 CV ins and the one max control.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So then the next question is, all right, where do I find those?
The music modular one, the music thing modular ones are usually most readily available at Thonk. But if you're in the U.S. and Thonk delivers in the U.S. too, so that's usually not a problem. But you might get a better shipping deal if you look at SynthCube or Modular Attic.
They actually have free shipping until the end of the month.
Right. Sometimes there's extras, or SynthCube will have like a 20% off month or something like that.
Now, one thing, let's say we get a little further advanced. We've made a few kits from there. Now, one of the debates I hear about are things like, when do you feel ready enough to get just a PCB and panel instead of the whole kit, and then you go and get your own pieces?
Never.
Money on buying all the parts.
I'm too lazy to source parts. I hate it. I only build full kits. Even when somebody wants me to make a video, and they don't offer full kits, at least mine has to be a full kit to make the video, or I won't get around to it. I have so much shit to do. I'm not gonna be like shopping for parts at Mauser. Sorry, give me the full kit.
Yeah, it's hard. I think it's a difficult question. I think that because there's no point at which that becomes something that you're able to do, because it's a shopping list, and you have to spend the time and invest the time in doing that. But there's all sorts of problems that throws up in understanding what a component is, and you're looking at something and it's on the website. Is that what it's supposed to look like, or is it something else? Is that the one? Is it the right size? Is it the right format? What do all these numbers mean?
I think I ended up with a capacitor this big accidentally once.
Yeah,
that happened to me too. And this one Eurorack module that's like 3 HP with a huge a cracker on the back.
Yeah. So there's sort of like a halfway house, I suppose. If you, I've started building some Cosmo modules from Look Mum No Computer, his metric 5U large Eurorack. Yeah. And they come with panels and front panels and PCBs.
They're not 5U, they're Cosmo format. It's
that's right. He calls it metric 5U.
Yeah,
so
it's 20 centimeters. It's the same size I made my first U-Synth. And I chose my own
I'm building
format.
some of those. Look Mom No Computer modules.
Sorry,
yeah,
we interrupted you.
Yeah, they're great.
What Sam does is he supplies links to all the components. So although you have to get them yourself, you at least have a reliable link to some kind of something that should be the sort of thing you of should be buying. Although he tends to do it, he does it in multiples of 100. So I've got like an entire box of resistors, and I need about 3 of each. But that's just how they go.
Stock. Yeah.
I Justin had to help me order.
So it's good to get that sort of one step along the way before you're having to just pick your own components, because it's really hard.
Some of the new build guides have this thing called the interactive BOM, BOM, which I think KiCad generates it. So if they design on KiCad, they can very easily create this thing where you can hover your mouse over the board, and any component, you can click on it, it'll show you where it is on the list, it'll show you a link to where to buy it and all that. So this is a new thing that's been really helpful for some of these builds.
Yeah, the BOM, that's bill of materials for anybody. Yeah. So where can somebody learn more about all of this stuff? Like I've been doing this now. I want to get into it more. I mean, obviously we got some YouTube channels we could look at, pointing in the wrong directions. But what else?
Forum.
Where do you go for more info?
Synth societies.
Yeah.
All right.
ST Modular has a really dedicated build group on Facebook. I think depending on who the manufacturer is, they might have kind of their own little community around their modules for support.
Yeah.
And even just the Synth DIY community, general community in Facebook is super helpful. Like everybody's super nice in there. There's another one that Andrew from Nonlinear Circuits started called Synth DIY for non-engineers.
Yes.
So, because sometimes
like
there's some pedantic engineer that comes trying to teach everybody in the Synth DIY community, and then he decided to just open one for non-engineers and not allowed to be engineering there, even though he is an engineer with a doctorate.
We started this whole thing as a kind of just getting together and nerding out and soldering with each other. And if I have a question, I usually ask Justin because he's a guru. And if Shauna has a question, she has to ask me. Regarding anything she needs help on, I offer it. So it's just about reaching out to people and just having the confidence to actually ask questions.
Right.
You can ask it.
You never know everything. And you won't find out until you ask.
Yeah,
that's how we started our SoCal Synth Society. Actually, that's how we started. I needed a cable from Abe, and then we were like, let's hang out, and then we were soldering, and I wanted to get more into it, and Abe introduced us to Justin, and then it just sort of organically. So our first initial hangouts were just sitting at a table and soldering together, and then if somebody finished something at the end, it was like the win, and maybe there was time to have like a quick jam, but for the most part, it was just hours of sitting there until the sun went down and like into the nighttime soldering together, which makes it so much more fun, like the time goes by much quicker when you can chat with some friends. And
I used to do a meet here in Mexico. I used to do a meet here in Mexico on Saturdays, called LASD, which in Spanish meant Open Laboratory for Music and Electronics. And I would just have people come over with their projects to help troubleshoot them and stuff. And for a while, it was fun to hang out and have meet people. You meet great people that way. Maybe somebody's a beginner at DIY, but is a kick-ass mastering engineer. It's just crazy the kinds of people that are into this thing, and it's always a fun network of friends.
Are you going to do it again at any time soon, or?
I don't know. I'm started getting too busy. So right now I'm working on actually trying to digest all the work that I already have, because I'm doing a series for Netflix. Plus my channel really grew, and I'm getting lots of gear from different manufacturers I can't sit on the kit. I have to build it immediately when it comes in. But then like editing and making the video and thinking of the demo and all that sometimes takes me months. And some manufacturers have some expectations different than others. Some are so lax that I end up taking like over a year to deliver, and I apologize profusely, but it's just hard to manage all of the expectations. I just got hired by another, I can't even say who it is, another media company to write music for their sound library. So it's
nice. Congrats.
Thanks. Things are going well in my career musically, but that also means that my time for the DIY starts getting a little more limited. So I have to be very focused. I don't want to let the channel go, and I don't want to let the hobby go, because including how it feeds back into my work and my business. So I have to find like the right balance, I guess. But yeah, holding an open lab is just not in the future anymore, I don't think.
So we got a question here on the chat about developing your own modules after DIYing. I'd have to say there is an arc that one could follow from doing the paint by numbers and learning more, and then you start sourcing your own parts and you start learning about the electronics bits, and then you'll start finding that a lot of, especially Eurorack modules, have a lot of similar kinds of parts and circuits and so forth, and you start looking at the open source kits and you start seeing how they're made, and because you're trying to troubleshoot stuff, And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I should modify this one module because if I did a thing here, then that would be that way. And then you find yourself making your own modules.
Totally.
No going back.
I got into that a little bit for a while because I started getting really excited about electronics and about the mathematics of it, the logic of it, like following that flow of electrons. When you start reading Ray Wilson's descriptions of circuits, those are awesome, by the way. Anybody who wants to start understanding electronics, go build a Ray Wilson circuit and read his description. At first, it won't make any sense, but you just sort of let the watermelon settle at the bottom of the truck, you know. They let the information come in and it starts to slowly connect. Yep. And after a while, you start understanding, oh, so that's what the transistor is doing, or that's what the resistor does here. That's resistor divider. And you start to understand little like clumps of information, like what parallel capacitance, resistor divider, like different ways to wire a potentiometer if you want it to be a variable resistor or an attenuator, et cetera, et cetera. And then you start putting those together. And oh, what if I did this little block with this little block with this little block? It will achieve something that I've been wanting to achieve that actually takes up a whole bunch of modules, whatnot. And then it's inevitable. But then for some people like me, when you get to the stage of trying to design an actual board on dip trace and you take 3 days to make a buffered mult, you're like, okay, I have friends that are better at that than me. Why don't I tell them what I want? You know, in exchange for some videos. They can
help you, like, try to facilitate your idea. I'm sorry, I got to jump in here, you guys. I got to cut you guys off. My apologies. We're 4 minutes out at the top of the hour, from the top of the hour, 1 o'clock. This program is obviously too short, but, you know, I'm happy that you guys all came together. I really appreciate you joining us for this panel. Everybody at 1, please migrate over to the next panel, which is on hybrid Eurorack systems. Same channel, different link on YouTube. And yeah, like, does anybody really quick want to just say just a few last words? Robin, did you tell everybody what you're working on? I don't think
I'm working on the flipping Descartes' dream, aren't I?
Yeah.
Look at this bastard. So yeah, I'm just doing some diodes at the moment, which is that's all right. That's okay.
Nice.
Just make sure those polarities are correct.
Oh yes. Oh, yes.
Line up those lines.
Yeah, right. You can follow Robin on his channel, Molten Modular. He's been doing pop-up hours here and there through different segments and part of the process. Right? I watched your last one. You're just yesterday you put one up, I think.
Yeah, all those resistors, like 1600 odd resistors. I time lapsed it down to about half an hour, and it was about 14 hours in total. But,
all right, and Saddle Up the Robots, thanks for joining us and your tips. North Coast Modular, it's always a pleasure. I know you guys, like, please, everyone, you know, are you still doing, really quick, are you still doing those little synth, the 1U modules? Sean built one of those, like a starter kit.
Yeah, we're starting to ramp back up and get back integrated into society again.
Okay, great. So, you know what, if you send me a link, I will put it in the description of this panel so then they can find where they can find that, because that was like a nice little build that Sean, that was like a win. He loved that thing.
That sounds like fun.
Keith says, thank you so much for joining us. I dropped your link too. Your Patreon has been super helpful to me. I know other people will find it helpful if they do not know who you are.
Thank you.
Please go to the description and check out his link. SoCal Synth Crew, I know you're going to be here all day on that camera over there. So periodically, I think I'm going to drop you guys in throughout the session today. So keep soldering. And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you over at the hybrid Eurorack.
Stay noisy, everybody.
All right, nice meeting everyone. Nice meeting everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the show. Yay!